Yesterday I mentioned in passing how the residents of Portlock, Alaska all fled in the 1950s after a string of strange murders and disappearances. There's a number of strange things about Portlock, including the fact that it's only been listed in the US Census twice, and both times, 40 years apart, it had exactly 31 residents. And before I tell this story, I just want to set the scene for you really quick. Portlock is located in southern Alaska. Alaska is the largest state in the Union, being about 2.5 times the size of Texas, but it also has the lowest population density of any state in the country. And back in the 1940s, when it first reported on the census, it wasn't any more dense. But what we're talking about here is a land rich with natural resources, fish, pelts, all sorts of things that people could easily have traded for back in the day. And you might think, oh, maybe it was climate change or economic conditions, but there's several little villages around the area that are still inhabited, and they all say Portlock is haunted. So what exactly happened there? The first time it was reported that something strange was going on was in 1905, when workers at the salmon cannery in town all left their camp unexpectedly. According to them, something mysterious was bothering the camp. Those workers would return the next season, but still report unexplained events. Things escalated in 1931 when a resident was killed by a blow to the head that was too strong for a human to manage. Around this time, hunting parties started to report large footprints over 18 inches long while they were out hunting for moose. And then, as we moved on into the 1940s, people began to go missing. When search parties went out looking for them, they couldn't find bodies, nor could they find tracks or any real explanation of how these people had disappeared. Now you might be thinking, it's Alaska, maybe it was a grizzly or a polar bear. Well, that's the problem, they never found bear tracks. And then these bodies began showing up completely torn apart in ways that just simply didn't fit for any natural predator we know of, floating in the nearby lake. Simultaneously, there were reports of a large, hairy humanoid creature that was stalking the forests. As well, people reported seeing a woman who was dressed in black wandering the cliffsides who would scream and moan. If you've been keeping up with my page, you probably know that sounds pretty damn similar to a banshee. Banshees themselves not being monsters, but rather harbingers of death. As the disappearances continued and bodies still showed up in the lake completely torn apart, the residents of Portlock simply decided it was best to leave. By the 1950s, the entire town had been abandoned and only the postmaster was left. Which you can just imagine how awful an existence that would be, being the postmaster in a town that is completely abandoned because something was killing residents, dragging their bodies into the woods, tearing them apart, and then throwing them in the lake. Also odd about this is that Alaska was the 49th state to be admitted to the Union, only beating out Hawaii. And Alaska being an oil and natural resource-rich territory, you would think that the federal government will want to incentivize people to move there. Instead, Portlock was simply swept under the rug, and to this day, the other residents of the towns around it still say it's haunted. And there's one more part that gets me. The town was abandoned in 1950, and yet it shows up on the census in 1980. Do with that what you will.